Pony. In this video, I will be discussing the elements, people, projects, media, everything I can think of that currently inspires my artwork and my other creations, namely my characters and their stories. The first and most vague thing I will mention that inspires what I make, everything I make, would be horror media. That includes films, novels, short stories, art, visual art that is, music, anything you can think of. All horror media I have always been into all my life as far as I can recall, and it has always inspired the ideas that I get and how I execute my work. This may not be as visible nowadays because I draw much more pastel cutesy art without as many creepy or horror-like elements, but this has always been a major factor not only in the pieces I create, but in my life as well. I have always harbored my interest in it. The first inspiration that I will talk about is my biggest inspiration, and what he mostly inspires would be my stories and story making, everything about them basically. He's influenced what I am into, and I have been such a big fan of his creations ever since I was first introduced to his work, and that would be the manga artist Jun Jie Etho. You may know him as the artist and creator of Tomie, Uzumaki, The Enigma of Amigara Fault, I think it was called. That one not too long ago blew up on Tumblr, and everyone was so impressed by his story. I personally had found it before that because of how much I had delved into his creations, and I was absolutely ecstatic to find out everyone else getting into him, because he would be the story maker that I recommend to everyone around me who is also into horror. Personally, I own several of his manga. I own all of the volumes of Uzumaki. I own a volume of Tomie, the one volume of Tomie. I own his collection that's been translated. And I would honestly read all of his stories over and over again if I really were in the mood to read something at the time. But he just creates that type of work. The type of work that, for me, I would be absolutely into reading again and again. Next, I would mention Takashi Murakami, who mostly influences the exaggerated cartoony style I will use occasionally, as well as some elements in my usual art style. He also heavily influences the colors I use when I make art more resembling pop art. If you are not familiar with Takashi Murakami, you may know him actually as the guy who did the art for Kanye West in one of his albums. I can't remember the specific name of it, but you know his bear persona, his fursona. That character, I believe, was designed by Takashi, and the art definitely was made by him. I personally was such a big fan of that, and that is how I was originally introduced to his work. I later learned more about him when I wrote a paper on him for my art appreciation class. Next, the artist I would mention would be Pinellia Sachiko, who I mostly knew as a user on DeviantArt. I never knew her personally, but I knew her art, and she heavily influenced the art I created in the year 2013. Her art is very unique and has even the content in her art you don't see a lot in other people's art. At least in my case, I have not. I am still a big fan of her work, even if the influence does not show up as much in my current art. The following media has also inspired me, and it ranges from television programs to television programs. One is actually anime, so you don't find it on American television, mostly because this anime is older, it doesn't show up, and it's pretty graphic. That would be Higurashi no Nakukoro ni, and that influenced absolutely everything I created when I was younger, and I still have such a strong love for this series. The series itself has influenced myself in my work, not only in terms of art in the past, but currently it would be the horror elements of the story itself, and the characters' roles in it, as well as their personalities that currently inspire me nowadays. Higurashi was such a big part of my life as a 12-year-old, which is probably not the best because of how graphic this anime, this game, this manga series is. I mostly knew it as the anime. I never got the chance to play the game, but I did collect several arcs of the manga, which, if you aren't aware, it is the same story being repeated over and over with different changes to it, which would be explained once you get further into the series. I actually have several arcs in books, which means overall I have upwards of 10 to 15 novels, manga volumes for Higurashi, and I am still so into that. I would reread it if I got in the mood to read something like I would Jun Jie Etho. So that too influences me. Other media that I consume that influences my current work would include the Twilight Zone, primarily the 1960s series of it, because I have not seen as many episodes of the 1980s remake. But the Twilight Zone had such unique and creative stories, and each and every one was so good to either watch or to read about, because I may not have been able to watch every episode, I may not have been able to find it, but every episode I could read about just intrigued me. I am also influenced for the same reasons by American Horror Story, which may have its own problems, but the basic stories of each and every season have always intrigued me as well. I love learning about the characters and the twists and turns each season takes. I love the unique aesthetic each season has in comparison to the previous season or the next season. I love that it switches from story to story with a different setting, with different characters. Meanwhile, they're played by the same actors. That's such a unique take on something that I've never seen before. However, I have not been exposed to so much media. I do think this is something new to me, and I personally find so much inspiration in it. I would definitely recommend it to people who are not faint of heart and who are personally into horror media, as well as controversial media. Not being into it, but more so being able to handle it without getting heated or upset. The final inspiration I will mention for this video would be the artists you find me following on social media. All of these artists happen to give me inspiration either in small ways or big ways, and in the end, I follow them for a reason. Whether it be my own friends, my friends have always influenced me and my ideas and my art. I would personally recommend anyone I follow to anyone else who's looking for the type of inspiration I get. Finally, I guess I could mention it as an inspiration. What I take some influence from in my current art would be my old art. I take ideas from art I had in 2009 or so, maybe earlier, maybe later, but I like to revamp it all, as you would know if you're familiar with my work. Anyway, I would like to thank everyone for watching and listening. I hope maybe I could introduce you to someone or something new that could inspire you, yourself. If you have any requests or recommendations, you can always comment what you want to hear about or what you'd like to see, and I will see what I can do. So thank you again for listening, and I will see you guys another day. Goodbye.